all, it is my privilege and honor to welcome you all to the Pragati Vichar Literature Festival's Authors Marathon. Today's theme is mythology, and the topic for today is Gods and Mortals, a mythological exploration. Allow me to introduce the wonderful panelists for the today. First on the panel, we are having Mr. Ranjith Radhakrishnan. He is a Bengaluru-based entrepreneur. He is an ex-actor, assistant director, script assistant, toll manager, and ex pretty much everything else. He is a father to a brat and a husband to a wife who loves dogs, cats, cows, elephants, her husband, and other animals. His first published story is Shakuni, The Dice of Death, in the anthology Unsung Valor. He also has a narrative poem, Tushara Swayamvara, published in the anthology Arya. Rama of the X is his first published novel. He is currently writing part two of the story. Mr. Ranjit we are very much looking forward to your second book. It is a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much. Namaste and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you're in. Happy to be here. First book, and I'm already with PVLF. That's a great honor, great privilege. Thank you so much for having me on.
Likewise, sir. Now, introducing our second panelist, Mr. Antar Atreya. He is a crossword best-selling author and speaker who writes in the mythology space. His debut book won the Best Mythology Fiction, and he has also delivered writing workshops for some major institutions like IIT Bombay, IIT Palakkad, and SRCC. Several leading media platforms like Outlook Entrepreneur have featured him. His next book, based on a war between two Hindu gods, will come out in 2024, published by Om Books International. Mr. Antar, we are very much looking forward to your upcoming books, and it is really a pleasure to have you on the board today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's really a privilege to be a part of this fest. And, I should really thank the Bookmakers Literary Agency for, connecting us. And also, Atisha, you have been really very easeful and with all the preparations and everything. And there's been a great coordination. So really thank you for all that. And to everyone watching us, I just hope you'll have a, intriguing session here. And we are going to have a lot of chat, Ranjit, right?
Yes.
Very much looking forward to our conversation. So, right off the bat, let's start with my first question to both of you. So, my first question would be, what inspired you to delve into Indian mythology as a backdrop of your respective novels? And what drew you to specific characters and themes you explored in your books? So, Mr. Ranjit, so your book, Rama of the Axe, it specifically focuses on the Parshurama avatar, right? So, why don't you guide us further from here?
Okay. See, my first published work was that Shakuni short story that came out in that anthology, Unsung Valor. So I was following this thread on Twitter, and when they asked for submissions for a short story, I went up and looked up at the list of characters they had. And I picked Shakuni because I thought nobody would pick him. It would be a safe option, not too many entries for Shakuni. But we were supposed to write about the 18 days of the Mahabharat war. And I don't know how many people know this, but Shakuni survived up to the 18th day. And he was not a coward, and he didn't run away from battle. Of course, he lost and had to retreat and all that. But there was a particular incident on the 11th day of the Mahabharat war where he sort of prevails over Sahadeva. And I used that incident to try and get you into the mind of Shakuni. And when that book came out, I saw the reviews and I saw how people responded to the short story, which is when I got that inspiration to start writing this. And I really didn't think about why I chose Parshurama till I finished maybe about 5 or 6 chapters of the book. But this story was always there at the back of my head. And it was as I was writing that I realized that, there are very few Parashurama temples. If you were to call them superstars, the superstars of the Dashavatar are Sri Rama and Sri Krishna. The 7th and the 8th, the 6th is not so much in focus. And that was intriguing in itself. And I remember there is this temple in Kerala, just outside Trivandrum, where a lot of people go to do the last rites of people from their family who have passed away. And that is a Parashurama temple. And though I've stayed in Trivandrum and I've gone to all the other major temples, I've never gone to this particular one, and nobody really mentioned it to me. So it's when there was a period of time where I had to, there were so many deaths in my family that I had to keep going there to perform the last rites of whoever had passed away, starting with my father in 1999. The statue there, Parshurama there, supposed to face Ananta Padmanabha Swami, which is the best known temple in Trivandrum. And that's how the intrigue with this sixth avatar started, because I knew the bare bones of a story, and I started reading up about him. And most of the books that were written uh, were are dealing with it in a very realistic, natural kind of way. There's no divinity, there's no superpower, supernatural stuff happening, and I wanted to bring that part of the divinity there, which is why I started writing about Parashurama. And the more I knew, got to know about how much breadth and depth this avatara has, uh, I thought, I mean, this is somebody that hasn't been written much about. We don't have one book on Parashurama. We don't have a Parashuramayana. We don't have a Bhargava Charitam or anything like that. So it's all in bits and pieces here and there. And the more I found out, the more interesting and magnificent the character happened to be, which is why I thought Parashurama also deserves a little bit of the attention now. Since a lot of people are reading mythology, maybe I can put the story of Parashurama in front of them in a way that they relate to.
Hmm. I very much agree with you, Ranjit ji. Like even like while I grew up, a lot of focus was on Rama and Krishna. Like even the our cartoons, even our media depicted
Sure.
a lot of those. However, when it comes to Parshurama or the other avatars, I would say the newer term would be underrated, like where they are not much explored about in the media in the books. And I definitely believe it is a wonderful attempt into the mythology of Parshurama as well. So, Antarji, why don't you take us further from here?
Yeah, so answering the same question with respect to my book, I have to, tell you a bit about myself because I have been an atheist. Like I was an atheist, and from there I went to becoming a God-loving person. And I want to stress it here: I'm not a God-fearing person. I'm a God-loving man. And I always believe spirituality or a relation that a mortal or any human being has with his own God. It's a very personal, a very private affair. Now, if we take the example of Prahlad here, like if we delve into the logical part, we'd never, find the answer that why he did not perish in the fire, right? And we are never going to understand this because the relationship between Prahlad and Vishnu, that was only known to the both of them. We can only just understand the essence of it, but what was actually there, what exactly existed there, it's very mysterious. And that is why it's, everything is so divine. We cannot, find out logic or scientific rationality behind everything. So this is what I believe, that these are very private affairs, and something, very kind of a butterfly effect kind of a thing happened in my life. It was back in 2016, and I was just a graduate. I graduated in economics from Delhi University, and obviously, I had different, verticals to try my hands out. I was just 21. I was, looking to, perhaps go and, get a degree abroad. At the same time, I was also looking for options like MBA and on. And there were certain, personal stuff that was going on in my life, and I went into depression. So I was on a period of depression for a 9 month long period, and it was, I was on medication. Obviously, medication was doing its work, but at the same time, I wanted to feel better from the inside. I wanted to rediscover myself, and it was then that it was my mother. She suggested that I should simply maybe perhaps give a read to the spiritual texts, or whatever materials we can find online, mostly centered around the Bhagavad Gita. So I started it. It was just because I had nothing else to do. I was not a very happy person back then. Television, movies, books were not interesting me at that point of time. And then I delved into the Bhagavad Gita, and there I realized one thing. Until that I was 21 then. So the last 21 years of my life, I was always focused on asking things from God, or just being very self-centered. But after reading the Bhagavad Gita and other spiritual texts, I understood one thing, that the connection between God and the human is on a very collective level. I mean, here we talk about development or growth. We always talk about personal growth, personal development, but it's always about the collective growth or the collective development that God is concerned about. And it's very essential that we understand God in a way that fits us, or in a way that helps us to grow better as a person. And the very same idea was in my first book, Chronicles of the Mortal Vishnu. So there the lead character is not somebody who is born and he turns into a hero or turns into an avatar. He was very much like me. Like he had his own odds to deal with. He had his own lacunes, and there were many episodes, many voltas in his life, and for certain reasons he started believing in God. And on thereafter he understood spirituality. Thereafter he understood how the plan of God works. I mean, here, take another example of perhaps Krishna's biological parents, Vasudeva and Devaki. A hell lot of wars happened with them, right? I mean, 8 of their kids, they were killed right in front of their eyes, and they were like, plastered from a height onto a rock. That was, they had to witness such horrific deaths of their children. I mean, the infants, the newborn ones. But at the same time, as the final child of Devki, Krishna was born, and we entirely know how everything changed. So that is how the plan of God works. It's on a very macro level. If we try to understand it in a very micro level, it is always going to be difficult. And based on these concepts or these principles that I particularly believed in, so Chronicles of the Mortal Vishnu was formed, and especially my characters. It's always about self introspection. It's always about challenging the norms or whatever we call as culture or traditions, and understanding the deeper meanings behind it. Another example, if I directly quote from my last book, so there was a scene where I talk about animal sacrifice. So there was a particular kind of an animal that existed in that time, according to my book, according in my word, and those were like surreal in numbers, and they used to disrupt the food chain. So what started as something, just because the humans had to kill them, some of them at least, and that was a very negative kind of a connotation to there. And so they decided to paint it under the structure of a, maybe we are killing this animal and then sacrificing it to the god, because that what makes us, perhaps we'd find the strength to do that bad deed. So that was how it started. And once the food chain became more balanced, thereafter, logically, the killing should have been stopped. And that did not happen. And then the central character and other characters, they become a part of that episode, and they understand it. They make the world understand about it. So that is why how I believe religion, or any of our texts or everything should be interpreted. And that is the same basic principle that I used in my book.
That seems really interesting and valid from you, Mr. Antar. A follow-up question from my side would be to both of you actually. So, what does spirituality mean to you? So, Antarji, why don't you take it from here?
See, for me, spirituality is basically, how we can be a more positive and a better person. I believe that at the end of the day, what defines any religion, the backbone of any religion, let it be Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Sikhism, anything, the basic thing is about compassion and greater good. So whenever any deed, any action, or anything that has greater good in it, I think God is associated with it, and that is what is a part of spirituality. But before that, before a person can work towards greater good, what he has to do or she has to do is work on themselves, and that is when spirituality, I believe, comes into being. Because spirituality, as per spirituality, is, what does in layman terms spirituality means? It just means that understanding oneself better, and understanding oneself in resonance, and in and in parameters with others, and also perhaps with the relation or the connection that we have with the natural elements or the nature. All those things, all those less materialistic things that go on around us, when we consume them, when you filter out the more practical things out of that, and only keep the philosophical insights within ourselves, that is what spirituality is to me. So that is how I view it, and I believe that it's for everyone. Like, obviously, I'm not endorsing my idea, but this is something that I wish that everyone can try for once. Just see spirituality as something, that's something, anything that you can be a better person, you can know yourself better, as that I would say spirituality.
Ranjiji, I would love to hear your perspective on that as well.
Okay, mine's a slightly different take on this. Um, see, we don't need religion or some kind of theology to teach us to be a good person, to teach us morality, what is decent, courteous. For me, spirituality is me showing my devotion and my gratitude to the form of the divine that I have chosen to worship. So there is a certain initiation that happens. There are forms that you can worship without an initiation. There are certain chants that you can do. So for me, it is my gratitude towards that form the discipline with which I do this for the amount of time that I have said I will do, the number of times I'm able to connect with that form of the deity and accept that deity's grace in my life, whatever it may be. Now, we all go through ups and downs in life. The one constant is my bhakti towards the form that I've chosen. So my spirituality is looking at something that is more than human and seeing what it can teach us to get through this, this life and the karmas that I have to fulfill in this life. So it's basically a little more orthodox than what people like to think spirituality is today. But it keeps me grounded. Like, for example, I've said in many interviews that I have Ranjith Radhakrishnan written on the cover of the book. But that does not mean that I am the sole author of it. Many times I've sat down to write, and I have a particular plot or a graph, or I know what I'm going to write in a particular chapter, but it takes on a life of its own. So you sometimes literally feel that all you need to do is to put that pen to paper, and somebody else is filling your head with what needs to be there. So for me, spirituality is that connect. I don't believe that I could have written this book if I had not done my sadhana, or if I had not pursued this path of spirituality that I had. If it was a person from, say, 20 years ago, I don't think I would have had this book in me at all. So that personal connect is what my spirituality is.
I believe like everyone has their own meaning or a definition of spirituality, while some tries to link it with their religion or the devotee, whatever they are following, while some try to stray away from the path of religion while they do not believe in the the rituals that we follow. They try to more stay positive and practice meditation or different kind of breathing exercises while they follow the spirituality. And one at the end of the day, it is more about whatever your personal beliefs are, and everyone has like the definition that everyone serves is perfect for them. So moving on ahead with the questions. So my next question would be: both of your books explore the concept of dharma and its various dimensions. So, how did you approach the interpretation of Dharma while staying true to their cultural significance and the essence? Ranjitji, why don't you take us from here?
Yeah, that's a very profound question that you're asking me. To give you an example from the Mahabharata, the narrative poem that I wrote, Tushara Swayamvara, is on a lady who's called Vriddha Kanya in the Mahabharata. We don't even have a name. She's called Kunigargi because she's Kunigarga's daughter. And this was a daughter he created with his yogic power. She didn't have a mother. So her story comes when Balrama takes on the pilgrimage once the Kurukshetra war started. And he comes to this particular tirtha or pilgrimage spot where people have narrated the story to him. And she's such a profound and such a strong ascetic, a sannyasini, but she's denied heaven because she hasn't married. Narada tells her that you have to complete this before you can attain Swarga. And how she gets married at that old age and how she attains Swarga is her story. The very next Tirtha is about a sannyasini who is as big an ascetic as Vriddha Kanya, but the condition of marriage is there. She attains Swarga without marrying. So you are given two. What matters there is your context, what prarabdha karma you're bringing in, and how to interpret, what is morality, what is dharma, what is the right thing here. So dharma is a very, very subtle thing. A lot of things come into play when you're trying to judge what this is, which is why we have so many dharma shastras with us. Mahabharata itself is a text that teaches you so much, right from Vidur Niti to the Yaksha Prashna that happens with Yudhishthir. When I was writing the story about Parashuram, one of the things that bothered me was that there is a lot of talk about ahimsa. There's a lot of talk about Vasudeva Kutumbakam. Where does this end? It looks like a very amorphous, borderless kind of thing that we are talking about. But every civilization, every culture that has had to survive has had to protect itself. So himsa is also required. And it's not two polar opposites. These are things that go hand in hand. So if there's a dharma to ahimsa, there is a dharma to himsa too. And exploring that is exploring the story of Parashuram, which is why I gave a different meaning to the term Brahmashatriya. If you're going to map Brahmashatriya to ahimsa and himsa, you need both for a culture, for a philosophy, for a civilization to thrive. One without the other is not going to lead you anywhere. So dharma is deciding when what is required, depending on circumstances, depending on the context of where you're in. We have such beautiful stories about this in Mahabharata itself, Dharma Vyada. That story is also a very beautiful one. The entire Yaksha Prashna with Yudhishthira is another beautiful example of it. And in the end, he chooses Nakula. When he says you can revive one brother, he doesn't choose Bhima and Arjuna. He chooses Nakula because Dharma tells him that my father had two wives. At least there are sons of each wife that survive. What greater example can there be? And it's because he chose that he was able to revive all his brothers. Since I'm a Malayali and I'm basically from Kerala, there is a lot of stuff that happens because of Mahabali and Vamana. And a lot of narrative has been pushed into that story. A lot of Asuras have fought the Devas, they've won, lost. But why is Mahabali Mahabali? Why is he to be the next Indra? It is because when Vamana comes and asks him for the third step, and he recognizes who's in front of him, and he says, your third step should be on my head, and that is my blessing. An adharmic king who threw the Devas out of their homeland realizes what is dharma before the third step, which is why Mahabali is an Asura who's going to become the next Indra. Nobody else has that position. It was a very dharmic thing that he did. It was not his conquest. It was not how powerful he was. It was him recognizing the divinity, the truth of why this avatar was here, and what should be my approach to him, which defined his dharma at that moment, and which made him Mahabali. I don't think we can get a better example of this in our Puranic stories. Actually, there are so many. If you look at Raja story, I used to tell people this. There was this very famous book abroad called Fountainhead. Ayn Rand wrote it, and there's this protagonist called Howard Rourke. If you were to transpose that story into our Puranas, we already have somebody that's much greater than Howard Rourke here. That's Raja Harishchandra. No matter what happened, no matter what Vishwamitra threw at him, he never moved from his word. To the extent that when his wife carries his son's dead body to the cremation ground, he asks her to pay the fee. You can't find somebody greater than that, to give a word and to keep it. That is dharma too. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Mahabharata when he says, anybody who insults the Gandiva will die in my hands. And when Yudhishthira does it, Krishna tells him, what kind of a stupid vow is this? And he talks him out of it. That too is dharma. So it's very subtle. It depends on the context. And you have to keep the greater good, your aim in life, what is required there at that particular circumstance, in that particular moment in mind while doing this. It's not a rule-based thing that you can, we will do only this and we will not do only this. You can't interpret dharma that way.
Definitely. Ranjit, first of all, I really love your enthusiasm while you're telling these stories. And like, I really got the goosebumps while I was listening to you. And
most of his points here. Yeah, absolutely. Dharma basically means your duty, like the duty that he was bound to do. I mean, for a student, his dharma will be simple. He needs to gain knowledge, needs to gain wisdom, he needs to gain experience. That's his dharma. Similarly, if there is a person here, I mean, if there is a person who has no job and he needs to feed his family and he resorts to stealing, that's his dharma somewhere, that he's feeding his family. But at the same time, we know the story of Valmiki, right? But at the end of the day, when you need to, you have a very symmetric connection between dharma and karma, right? If that is your dharma, if stealing is your dharma, then you should be prepared for the karma for it as well, right? It was then that Valmiki realized that his own family was not willing to take the result, the karmas, and he had to himself take up everything upon himself. Then he changed to be a better person, and he became what we can call, he did things that was for greater good, that had less of selfishness and more of selflessness in them. And that is why he became what we know him today as. So obviously, there is I believe there is the individual dharma, and there is also a dharma or a duty that we have towards the society, or towards the community, or towards the nature. Because if we go by the text, or if we go by the definitions in the Bhagavad Gita, it just clearly said that everybody, every living being on this earth is a parmansh, right? Parmansh means an ansh, or a portion of the god. And Krishna has mentioned it clearly that until and unless there is no human being, there is no living being on this earth who is free from injustice, who is happy, who is free from, sorrow and everything, the entire happiness or the entire fulfillment of the entire humankind is futile. And so is God's happiness is also futile that way. So, it's always that, our dharma, I believe our dharma can never end. Even if I'm a good son, maybe I'm a good brother, I'm a good boyfriend, I'm a good husband, I'm a good father. I mean, maybe I'm even a good person. So maybe I have finished many of my duties in a very good way. But at the end of my life, I have never helped anybody. I have never done something more for anybody. So it's that I have never tried to give back anything. So maybe I'm a good person, but I won't say that my dharma uh, is to up to the level that it should have been. So here, that is how I perceive dharma, and I believe that, just like Ranjit ji said, there are two characteristics that basic foundations of dharma, and that way the concept of dharma never changes with time. I mean, if there is dharma, there will be compassion in it, and there will be selflessness in it. I mean, in other words, there will be greater good in it. But what I believe in, at the same time, there are certain conditions or situations in our life in which dharma and dharma collides. Right, it's very easy to pick between the good and a bad. It's very difficult to pick between when there's something decent and there is something good, or both are good things, but the degree varies. So my next book, which I'm working on, it's, as I told, it's a war book between two Hindu gods. It's a reimagination, and here both the primary gods, they had their own reasons, they had their own dharmas, and to protect their own dharmas, they faced each other. They faced each other for the bloodiest and the most brutal war. It was even a more brutal one than the Kurukshetra. So, that happened, and the winner of that war, particularly, we cannot call them a winner through, maybe a combat, or maybe, but the philosophical winner of the entire incident was that God with whom the portion of greater goodness was there. So I always believe that, whatever you do, whatever is your dharma has to not only think about yourself, it has to benefit, or at least you have to think about somebody else, and that has to come out really selflessly. So that's very necessary. Today I'm an author, I'm doing something, right? Of course, when I pitch my story towards anyone, I pitch in the genre of commercial fiction, right? I'm a commercial writer, but then I have a career in writing, but I know that I have certain degree or certain level of talent. I had certain skills that was God gifted to me. And at the end of my career, I never wrote something, or I never, propagated any view that has some non-materialistic benefit in it, or something that only that has no vested interest for me, or no returns for me. But basically, I'm doing it, I'm writing something, or I'm creating an idea, or I'm propagating idea just for the greater good. Then I think my dharma as a writer would be fulfilled. Until I do that, I think I'm only halfway there. So that is how I believe it. And especially in today's contemporary world, I think it's more practical if we can view it this way, and the world would be a better place, I would say.
Hmm. I believe your answers very much resonates with the famous saying of "Neki kar and darya mein dal," and it is actually a really insightful thing that you linked about the dharma and the karma interrelation. So now moving ahead, so all of your book features unique and captivating characters. So can you tell us more about the inspiration behind these characters and their roles in the larger mythological narrative? Antarji, why don't you begin?
See, I think basically the in my previous two answers, this question was more or less answered. In the greater mythological perspective, my character in Chronicles of the Mortal Vishnu was more about discovering himself, discovering his own relationship or the connection that he has with divinity, understanding spirituality, just like Ranjit ji said. Understanding spirituality, thanking and being grateful to the divine, and then doing the dharma of his life. So basically, that is the larger narrative of my first book, and I think if I go on to elaborate this, it would be more or less the points of the previous two answers that I've already shared.
Okay, perfect. So, Ranjit, would you like to add on to something?
Yeah, see, mythology is a controversial term nowadays. A lot of people, when I say this on Twitter, on social media, I just tell them, see, this is a book category. We don't have an itihasa category there. So I
Right.
have to put it here as mythology. It doesn't mean that I don't believe it's true or something of the sort. I do believe it's true. And there is a reason why it is narrated in this particular way to us. It's for us to interpret, depending on the age and the times that we live in. But when we think of mythology, we only think of the Puranas and the stories there. There is a whole lot of stories that are there in folklore. And I would not have written this book if I had not paid attention to that too. Because in the Puranic version of the story, Renuka doesn't have that much of a role to play. She was punished for a transgression where she saw something. It's not something that she indulged in like Ahalya. Yet her punishment was decapitation. Her husband tells his children to behead the mother. And the story that's usually given to us, of what I've read, is that he was such an obedient son that he went ahead and did what his father did. But the interesting thing here is his four elder brothers did not. Okay. So if you were talking of dharma just now, so where does dharma lie? In not beheading your mother, because I don't know whether the reason was told to them. I don't think the reason was not killing another human being, not killing your mother, or following the orders of your father. Now you have a dilemma right there.
Hmm.
The stories of Parashuram I have read usually refer to this incident in passing. They don't, or they go with the obedient son kind of narrative. It's only when I heard about this temple in northern Karnataka. It's in a place called Saundatti in Belgaum district. And there's a Renuka Devi temple there. And she's looked upon as a manifestation of one of the Mahavidyas. It was when I read about that I got the key to the entire story of Rama of the Axe. And if I hadn't looked at mythology, folklore especially, I wouldn't have known this. So our wisdom, maybe the key is, maybe our rishis were a little clever in putting clues everywhere for us to interpret or for us to try and understand the story this way. For me, it's a very fascinating world where I'm like, in my mind, I'm like a little bit of a detective where I'm putting up these things together and see where they connect and how I can bring up a narrative. Because if I was saying the same story again, you might as well go read the Purana. You don't need to read my book. So what am I bringing new to the narrative of the story? Is there a new aspect to this? Can I give you a new insight into this incident where it's not just an obedient son, but there is something happening and they're all playing their parts and they're forced to pick a path? So both ways, not killing the mother and killing the mother, both happen to be dharma for those respective persons on that, because it was a test to see who's going to come out as a Brahmashatriya. Okay, so it makes a very pivotal point in the story. And I thought understanding Parashurama and bringing his avatar, because there's this notion that he's an angry guy and that's it. So he's got this axe and he's looking for the next thing to cut. There's nothing more to him. So that incident and knowing about the temple is, sort of opened the story in my mind, how to write. So I would always ask people to go back and read the Purana, take a unabridged version of it and read it so you know where the narrative is coming from and what has been changed in the narrative from what is there originally.
Right. I believe there's much more to explore. For instance, just showing off what little knowledge that I have about the Parshurama is that he's one of the 10 Chiranjeevi, one of
Yeah.
the 10 immortals. And what I believe is our Itihas and our Puranas are so well crafted that once you go through them, you won't be the same person that you were earlier before reading these things. And specifically talking about the mythology genre, what I believe is when we're specifically talking about the Western culture, so let's just talk about the Japanese culture. So they have a thing called manga, which is known as comics, in which they detail their culture, they detail their folklore so well that a guy sitting in India would be knowing about Nobunaga Oda, who was a general at that time. So what I believe is on our end, the mythological genre is definitely picking up the pace about the our recent attempts of the movies such as Brahmastra or the Kantara, and looking at a brighter future, I believe that much more experimentation and much more fruitful attempts from authors like you would be definitely beneficial in enriching our country as well as culture on a global perspective as well.
Yeah.
So now moving ahead with the questions. So writing mythological fiction can be a unique challenge. What were the most significant challenges you faced in crafting your stories, and how did you overcome them? So like often at times, well, earlier in our conversation also, Ranjit, you mentioned that it is mythology is somewhat controversial. And so, have you received any kind of backlashes, your challenges while writing into this mythological genre? So, Ranjit, why don't you take us from here?
Okay. The challenge per se was the narrative that's been set for us, maybe for the past 30, 40 years. A lot of stories have changed. Uh, to give you an example, there have been a lot of films, especially in the South, in the earlier days, where a lot of Puranic stories were made into movies. And in the 80s, you had uh, the Mahabharata come on TV, B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata. And you had one particular line there that Draupadi says that Andeka Putra Anda, which is not
Hmm.
there in the Mahabharata at all. So
Right.
Hmm.
you've just pivoted that entire story onto the saying of one lady, which she did not utter in the original at all. And now fingers start pointing at Draupadi being the cause for everything. As usual, we've ended up blaming a woman for something.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Okay. And they forget this is a Rajasuya Yagna. She would be sitting with her husband at the Yagna. She can't even get up from that until it finishes. So there's no way she's going to be there. Bhima would have laughed, and he's got sufficient grounds to laugh at Duryodhana for it. Uh, so there is a particular narrative that's being said, and you can find it across. You can find it in Mahabali's story. You can find it in Karna's story. You can find it, to link Deva and Asura with Aryan and Dravidian. So my challenge was not, or my question was not, how well I can say the story, but whether I would face a backlash because I'm going against the accepted narrative. Okay. So to write Parashurama as not just an angry man, there's a reason for his anger. It is a very
Hmm.
righteous, dharmic anger that he has. To bring out the role of each person there, uh, which goes against the narrative, is the only thing that I was concerned about. But I didn't care too much about it because as long as I was backed by what was there in the Puranas and what was there in the folklore, I am telling you my perspective of the story as it is told to us. So you mentioned Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad. Mahabali is Prahlad's grandson,
Right.
and he's a Vishnu Bhakta himself. So there is no sort of enmity that's happening there between Vamana and Mahabali. In fact, when the Devatas go and ask Vishnu and to help them, and they say, "Please kill this Asura for us," he says, "No, he's my Bhakta. I'm not going to kill him." All this has been hidden. So a story has been taken from our Puranas and it has been twisted and warped to fit a narrative, which is usually oppressor oppressed kind of thing,
Hmm.
upper caste, lower caste kind of thing. I didn't want to do that at all because that seems to be the trend that's happening here. And I didn't want to write about our divinities as very human. Okay, because the trend that's been here now is that anybody pick any god, pick any divinity, is a human being. And over time, they came to be considered God. So if I am a kid at a magic show, I want the magician to succeed at his magic. I don't want him to see him fail. Maybe I've seen a video where I know what the trick is, but I want to see how this guy does the trick. Maybe he's got a twist to it. So I can jump through all the hoops the magician puts in front of me, but this last hoop that he has, where he says he was a human being, and at the end everybody considered him God, I can't do that. For me, the divinities are divinities. An avatara is a descent of the divinity to mortal realm. Why did it come about? What were the circumstances? And I want the divinity, I want the divyastras, the spiritual power, the tapasya to be in my stories. So I went against the trend while writing this book, and I thought that was required to tell the story. Otherwise, you're sort of diminishing the stature of Parashurama. So happily enough, it looks like there are people who are willing to read it. So I'm happy about that.
Yes, definitely. So I believe we all have our own version of the story to tell, and we all tell it in a profound way, which makes the readers more interested and enthusiastic about our work. So Antarji, why don't you take us further from here?
See, for me, I think I would say that I had a more leniency while doing my first book because it was an out and out fantasy fiction. There was mythology in it, but I was not doing centered on some character. So the risk of, offending someone uselessly was, less there. But with mythology, with the very word, you run against, a brick wall. Whenever you use the word mythology, there is always a certain group there that has backlash. I put up a regular mythological content on my Instagram page. So till today, I haven't received any critical, statement about my work or about what I said. The only thing that people have a problem with is that I call Mahabharata mythology. I call Ramayana mythology, and it's very really difficult for me to explain them that calling them mythology does not mean that I don't believe that they happened in real. They happened. I mean, if we look for the word mythology on dictionary, it does not say that it's a fictional thing. It's a. I think I explain people that mythology is a more broader concept than history. History has the burden of scientific proof. If I today say that something used to happen in the Indus Valley civilization, I need to prove it, right? But
Hmm.
Mahabharata or the Ramayana do not need that burden of proof. When Krishna just by his touch, turned a disfigured old woman into a beautiful woman. We can only get the essence of bhakti, we can get the essence of samarpan, we can get the essence of trust and the mutual love that a god and a devotee has. We cannot, put in science there. We cannot, get in biology, physics, and chemistry there. That's not going to happen. And if everything is so understandable to everyone, then I don't think we needed mythology, we needed religion, we would never need God. If we can understand so much, if we can understand all of God's plan, we are God ourselves. It's not that, if I'm here, I'm just a mere mortal. I'm 27, 28 years of old, and here I'm, claiming, trying to find the, scientific rationality or logic behind everything that's written in a mythology, especially things that do not have any negative connotation to it. And then I challenge it just because, with concepts like, I haven't seen it, so it cannot exist, or how can you prove it scientifically? Those kind of questions aren't, you cannot answer them. It's based on what Ranjit just said. If we try to do that, we are bringing down the pedestal of God. We are bringing
Hmm.
them down to our level, and that's not going to happen. God, the first God, Swambhu, self-created itself. We know, we know the science has gone till the era of Big Bang, right? We know that everything
Hmm.
created from the Big Bang, the great explosion. But what existed before that? Can science
Hmm.
answer it? At least not for the next 100 years, and it's very difficult. And even if someday science, deciphers every other meaning, nobody ever is going to decipher this fact that beyond space and time, what existed before space and time. There was something, the concept of Hiranyagarbha, the concept of, Swambhu, all those concepts. You can never understand that. So there is always this challenge. And secondly, the challenge is to, not to offend somebody. It's really, sometimes, it's easy to say that I have a freedom of expression, I can write something and people should not be offended. It's true, I agree with that, but at the same time, when you were writing something for mass consumption, but you're writing something that will be critically evaluated, or something that people are going to relate with, you need to be more careful. I mean, I don't say that maybe there could have been a couple of mistakes, a couple of things that people might did not like in my book, but I genuinely never tried to, offend somebody's, emotions, somebody's respect towards a god. You won't find a question like this, that, it's merely a stone here, it's not god or something like that. I'd be telling that why it's important to, believe in that stone as a source of power, and how it will help you positively in your life. So those were the challenges, I believe. And for my first book, I was particularly interested in making it a visual saga, and that for that reason I tried to include a lot of description in it. I remember, there is a palace description in my story in the first few chapters. Before we get into the palace, there is a large gate, a gate that needs 20 people, 20 soldiers to, push it to and fro. And the gate was described in one page. So that was the kind of feel that I was trying to give in my first book to the to my audience, to my readers, that they should feel like they are there, they're viewing it, everything. And with all the reviews and everything coming out really positive, it's been quite some years now of that book, but I believe, there was this consensus in most of the reviews, may it be media reviews or reviews from normal readers. They found this visual experience really, intriguing. And for my next book, there will be some changes on it. Instead of going so much descriptive, I'm more focused on, an incident or episode based things. So, there is always those kind of things would always keep on changing, but at the same time, you really need to, make people believe in divinity through, mythology. I totally agree with Ranjit ji, that, if in every mythological retelling, or in if every mythological reimagination, we push this narrative that all the gods were once humans, then I think somewhere we are diluting with the
Hmm.
power, or the kind of adoration that we have for God. So, and there should be some sort of explanation for it. I mean, in my book, the Divyastras and everything, they they were just in the form that we find them in our ancient texts. I mean, some Mohan Astra will mesmerize you, hypnotize you. But the only thing that I did different was I brought up a concept that to invoke any particular Divyastra, you need to use some specific words, narrate them, or tell them in certain decibels, and the voice frequency or the voice length that comes out of your throat, they are going to amalgamate with natural elements, and then they're going to cause the invocation of an astra. Maybe there are flaws in it, maybe something there is it, but I think that's a balance between something that's believable and something that still adheres to the divine. I mean, this thing, even if this is true, even if this is true, that it's just all you need to do is you just need to learn a chant, and you need to murmur it in a certain decibel, but that's not possible for everyone. You need to be really trained, you need to be really have that samarpan towards God, that bhakti towards God, that bhakti towards your weapon.
Hmm.
That is the reason. That is why, for Arjuna, the Gandhi, it was not just a weapon for him. It was like he worshipped it. He worshipped it. I mean, it was a reverent thing for him. So, that is how I try to build my world. And that is how I try to, stay away from, unnecessary distractions in my mythological world building. But at the same time, if I believe in something and I know that goes against the popular narrative, I'm still going to write it, because if that's something that I have written, that's something I believe in, I'm going to stand for it.
Hmm. Definitely, Antarji. Like, I believe your answer has much more meaning towards the question and the impact of the mythological genre and the backlashes that one might feel while writing into this genre. And so now moving ahead with my question would be, so what do you believe is the key to fully appreciating and enjoying the stories that you have created? So your both of your novels have different narrative style and approaches. So Antarji, your book is described as detailed and immersive. Whereas Ranjit ji, yours is seen as more of a captivating read with various experiences. So, what do you believe? Like, is a how can we fully appreciate and enjoy the stories that ultimately we have created? Ranjit ji, why don't you take us from here?
Well, I guess that depends on the individual reader because finally you may have written one story, but it's 10,000 stories for 10,000 readers. Uh, you look at the feedback you get. There are some lines that I've written which I didn't think were like, so profound or anything of the sort. Just a simple line, but somebody's found that very,
Hmm.
somehow at that point of his life, or the stage where he's in, uh, he's found that very meaningful for them. So you never know what a reader is going to pick from your book. The only thing you can do is try and tell the story as best you can. Try and stick to the Antarji was talking about creative freedom. The only limit I put on creative freedom was I will not try and warp the character of my protagonist to suit what story I have in mind. Like I mentioned Draupadi sometime before. You
Hmm.
have all these crazy theories that how Draupadi had this kind of a secret crush on Karna and all that stuff. So I mean, that's being blown out of proportion now, especially if you go on platforms like Quora and all that stuff. It's Karna has almost become divinity there. Uh, so I was not willing to push that kind of a narrative where I changed the character of my protagonist, and I would approach him with the respect and dignity that is due to an avatar. And that's how I have written the book. What each reader takes away from them is their personal experience. What they found that appealed to them in the story, or what didn't appeal to them at all, why they hated the story so much, all depends on them. We are always told to look at your ideal reader when you're looking at stuff like this. Uh, it's very, very difficult to do that actually. You know that, okay, it'll be people who's interested in Puranas, who are interested in mythological retelling, but who don't want to read about our characters as just human beings. So does a reader like this actually exist? We don't know when we're writing. We only know after the book has come out and people pick it up and read, and then if at all they let you know on some
Hmm.
reviews whether they liked it or not. So I think the best you can do is to put out the truth of the story as you see it, and let other people sit in judgment and take what they can from the story. We cannot,
Hmm.
as authors, dictate that.
Hmm. So true. Antaji, your perspective on this would
Yeah,
be?
I totally agree with Ranjit ji here. You have to be really honest with yourself as a writer. Of course, we write for the readers, but readers will always vary. Depending on different demographics. Even if you're in your own TG, in your own target audience, based on different age groups or based on different even places, their interests are going to vary, so you cannot really comment on how readers should read your book. I mean, at the end of the day, just like for a business person, customer is the king. For an author, the reader is everything.
Hmm.
You cannot dictate here. Even if we talk about movies, then people like maybe there are people like me who enjoy every kind of movie. I would enjoy a Lunchbox, I would also enjoy a Chennai Express, I would enjoy perhaps Fight Club, and at the same time, I would enjoy even the Marvel movies. But at the same time, there's certain viewers who consider themselves cinephiles, and they watch every movie with a particular state of mind, or they have different agenda. While I'm not meaning anything negative here. Nowadays, agenda has a very negative connotation to it, but they have a different agenda, or they have their own choice or ways for watching a movie and understanding it or taking it the way they want. Similarly here, you can never predict what your reader is going to like. Maybe something that I did write and believe that is something very insightful within the narrative of my story, that kind may come across as very something very simple, and my reader might not even put his mind once again on it. And at the same time, maybe one of a simple scenes that that was only a combat scene between the hero and the villain, which I believe that it was just like any other cliche scene. Maybe the readers tend to like it for some reason. You can never predict it. Let me tell you an interesting story here. While I was doing the promotions of my book, I made a trailer. I made a trailer for the book. It cost me around 75,000 rupees. And, I really loved the trailer. Anybody, if you would like to watch it, you can go and check it out on YouTube or my Instagram ID. And I really loved it. I'm pretty sure even anybody, I guess you guys, even if you see it today, you will going to rate it 7 on 10, 8 on 10 or something like that, animated kind of a teaser. And I was really hopeful with that. But at the end of the day, the teaser flopped. People did not like it, and that has never changed. Even today, if I once again put up that teaser, I will get almost the same kind of reaction, even though the quality, according to me or according to my co-partners, was really nice. So these are the kind of things you can never predict, and you can never dictate.
Hmm.
I think you that is why it's very rare that a writer or or an author becomes a huge success or becomes a household name after one or two books. You need to write many books, and different kind of
Hmm.
readers are going to pick different books of yours. So it's always there, it's always subjective. And as a writer, I believe you should be honest to yourself, you should be honest to your characters, you should be uh, not writing something just because the market demands it. I mean, if you are just doing something because the market is demanding, is there are so many other verticals in which you can have your career, right? But I believe that
Hmm.
the art form, you cannot always completely, consider or completely have this the market factor at the back of your mind. But at the same time, you need to create a balance. If you don't at all think about your target audience, your book is never going to get commissioned. That means your book is never coming out. So there is this balance that you really need to have. The I am not someone, even in case of films, or all, I don't like this formulaic approach. If something is working now for the next 3 years, come on, let's make this same thing again and again. What happened after Wanted found immense success in 2009. Salman Khan, Akshay Kumar
Hmm.
came out with bang on the South Indian remakes, and people really loved it. And now you see, with the success of KGF or Pushpa, people are once again loving this anti-hero kind of a narrative. But it is going to change. Give it 3 years maximum, it is going to change. These things keep on changing. But as a writer, as an artist, you need to really be honest about what you can really do. You need to do about your strength. I mean, as a writer, if somebody is writing his first work, I would always recommend that write something that's personal to you, right? Something that you have always imagined. It's always, and everybody wants to hear a new unique voice, and that only comes up when it comes through your heart. It's a
Hmm.
satisfying the readers, or being the reader's favorite. It's a long haul game. You cannot expect it from couple of books, 3 4 books. It takes 10 books for people, unless you are an Arundhati Roy.
Hmm. A very unique perspective indeed. Out of a lot of conversation and with numerous authors, two commonalities which I could draw out was while like writing. So one thing was they stayed true to their voice, whatever they wanted to write, and the second thing was that they envisioned what their readers would love, and that is what I think would be the complete summary of about the writing for your consumers or for the readers. It was such a lovely conversation with both of you. I believe you both are really well versed with the mythological genre, with so much stories to offer, with so much information or the knowledge to impart on the readers. However, we are really short on time, and just one last question to both of you, and then we would be winding up this session. So, a specific question to you, Mr. Anta, would be: the Chronicles of Mortal Vishnu explores the concept of divinity turning corrupt. So, what motivated you to explore this particular theme and create a narrative about around it?
See, since a kid, I read this in my civics book, maybe fifth standard or sixth standard, that absolute power corrupts everybody. That was in reference to the executive, the legislation, the judiciary branch, and everything. But
Hmm.
that I always believe, nobody should have absolute power. Nobody should be unchecked. That is the basic concept. Even if we, directly relate this to our mythology or to our religion, especially Hinduism, we see Indra, and maybe nowadays most of the people know this, that Indra is not a person; it's a post. You know, and Indra, in his career, in his lifetime, have taken some wrong decisions, have made some errors in judgments and stuff like that. So that, especially if we look something at one particular thing, Indra always wanted to ensure that he sat on that throne. And for that, I would say he was somewhere, I won't say that he was wrong, but he was very attached to power. And I wanted to explore that part of Hindu mythology, that what
Hmm.
happens when somebody who is absolutely powerful becomes absolutely corrupt. So there's a lot of character development in this. The main villain in my book, he started as the mentor to mankind. He taught people about economics. He taught people how to build bridges. He led the civilization, and he was ruling over everyone in a very democratic way. And then one fine day, for some reason, with some incident, he discovers greed. He discovers that there is a possibility that after him, it can be his sons and daughters who can sit on the throne. So from there, he starts getting corrupt. So I believe no matter how much you have how much you look up to a person, maybe today I'm a big Shah Rukh Khan fan, a big fan. I would say there is so many things in my life have happened because many things in life, his life has happened. I've seek inspiration from him, but at the same time, I love him so much, but I don't want him to have unchecked power. And unchecked power in this case, for example, would mean
Hmm.
people accepting all kind of movies that he do, good, bad, ugly. But no, that does not happen, right? Until 2018 he had 4 back-to-back flops. So that is the nobody should have unchecked power, and that is the why I discovered this concept. But here I would also like to add one thing very clearly. When I mention about divinity turning corrupt, I don't consider the major deities or the major primary, forces, divine forces to turn corrupt, especially if we think about our, religion, Hinduism. So in that case, I would talk about the Trimurti and the Three Devi. I don't think they can get corrupt because they were created by them. They created themselves, they're much beyond everything, all this. But beyond that, I believe
Hmm.
everything, everyone, every person can get corrupt.
Hmm. Ranjit, would you like to add on to this something?
Um, there's a not very well known villain in Parshurama's story, that's Karthavir Arjuna. This is somebody who was so powerful that he could imprison even Ravan, and even Indra was scared of him. But he started off as a good man. He actually had Brigu's advice and support when he started off uh, becoming Chakravarti Samrat. But when you start relishing the power that you have, when you forget to be grateful for what you've received, for the karma that in your past lives that has got you into this position, when you forget that, is when your downfall actually begins. And with power will come ego, will come vanity, all the sins that you can think of will come there. You need somebody there to tell you not to, can show you the right way. Now, then it depends on whether you're like Dhritarashtra, who doesn't listen to Vidur at all, or Ravan, who doesn't listen to Vibhishana,
Hmm.
or you got to be so strong spiritually that you are able to be a check to your own emotions and desires, which is very rare, which means
Hmm.
you have attained rishihood, though even the rishis do fall from their lofty heights at times. Uh, the one thing that inspired me to write this story was when Krishna says that your varna is decided by guna and karma. And the popular narrative of Brahma Kshatriya is somebody who's born into a Brahmin varna, but
Hmm.
does something that a Kshatriya does. If that was the case, then we have so many Brahma Kshatriyas. Arjun, born in a Kshatriya family, but if he had to use all those Divyastras, how many years of tapasya did he do? Krishna himself
Right.
is called Yogeshwar. But why is Brahma Kshatriya associated only with Parshurama?
Hmm.
So there has to be another meaning to it. Just like it's not just an obedient son. A Brahma Kshatriya goes beyond Varna. And if it's based on guna and karma, what would be the guna and what would be the karma? So while positing this, I didn't know, you know, whether readers will accept it or not. This, so far, they seem to have accepted it. I would be writing more about it on part 2 of why is Parshurama Saptarishi.
Hmm.
That part of the story is not told. Usually, uh, people stop with what happens with the final battle with Arjuna. More than that is not known. It's
Hmm. Right. So, Ranjit, my next question to you would be: your book delves into complex themes such as social justice, the Varna system, and the rules of different castes. So, how did you balance providing an engaging narrative and imparting cultural significance? Also, what message or insight do you hope readers to take away from these discussions?
Okay. See, the message part is very easy. Okay. Please go back and read the original texts. You are going to know about these characters much more than what is being peddled out today in the name of popular fiction. There is a lot of narrative that's being peddled with a particular agenda in view. They are all approaching the stories with a particular lens. I would like you to read the same story without that lens. The choice on which to follow is completely yours. Like the writer has the creative freedom to choose how to write the story, the reader has the freedom to
Mm,
choose what he'd like to hear. But do know the other side too. When it's been just one-sided narrative so long, try and look at the other side. Go back to the original and see what's actually there. And does that resonate with you more? A lot of people make assumptions about the divinities or the stories in ours based on popular fiction, popular movies, not on what's originally there. And I remember a few people asking me, okay, if I want to read the Puranas, where do I start from? And I say, there must be somebody some character that caught your fancy, some divinity that you're attracted to. Maybe you're worshipping it.
mm,
Start reading about that. And the entire architecture is so good that you keep following that one character. You'll go across Purans. You'll find another character. You keep reading so many stories, and before you know it, you're back here. It's so
mm,
well put together. So please do that. Don't, I would read only this. Where do I start from? Follow the character that you like. It's the same thing that I do when I write. I follow the character. So when I'm bringing Brahmashatriya as something that's based on guna and karma, I can bring in the entire Varna system into it and follow what, the Yaksha Prashna, what Yudhishthira says, who is a Brahmin? And he gives you everything based on guna and karma, nothing based on his birth. So I can bring that there. It's there in our Puranas, there's in our story.
mm,
We just have to highlight it a little bit more. So it formed part of the narrative because I was giving a new definition to Brahmashatriya. It formed part of the narrative. I didn't have to go out of the way to bring it in. And since he's an avatar, what do you do with theologies that do not accept this entire concept of divinity at all? What would Parashurama do? I have described
mm,
that too. It comes as part of the narrative. There is a reason why he is given an axe by Mahadev. So what would be the reason for that axe to be there? Why was a Brahmin equipped with so many Divyastras? Why was he given an axe? Axe is a very brutal weapon. It's not something that kills at distance. It's right there in front of you. So to give somebody something like that, and somebody who's going to be a future Saptarishi, somebody who is an avatar of Vishnu, one of the greatest devotees of Mahadev. That's not Ravan. I disagree with that. Uh, who's got a Vedic hymn in his name, but is also in Sri Vidya, which
mm,
is Tantra. Okay, who has a guru in Guru Dattatreya, which connects him to the Nath Sampradaya and the Aghoris. So you have one avatar. I can't think of anybody else who's got connections with so many. These are
mm,
all different streams of worship. These are all different philosophies, all aimed at one, many paths leading to one. And this avatar has, walked on all these paths. So that is something so mind-blowing about Parashuram that I don't think a lot of people know about that. They know the angry part of it. Maybe they know about Kartavirarjuna and him. After that, what happens is nobody knows too much. So hopefully I can, with my next,
mm.
put it in there. The narrative lends itself to the story. If the narrative does not fit your story, it's best to drop it. But if it does, it would be a lie on the part of the author not to bring it in.
Mm,
So let the
Absolutely. I'd just like to, extend something here to the very points that Ranjit said here. It's always important, if somebody believes in spirituality or somebody is not an atheist, and then he's going to pick up your book and he's going to see it as you have written it. Maybe if there is more divine intervention, you'd believe it. If there is less of it, you won't have a problem to it. But it's always important that you also consider that if somebody who is an atheist or who does not know about religion, or particularly the episode that you have on which the book is being written, even they should be able to enjoy it as a story, as something that that has some insights in it. It's it would be only half work done if only the people who already has a belief in God, only they pick your book, our books, if only they pick our
Hmm.
books. I think it's better, that the story or the narrative should be such that, without, even if somebody does not want to believe the divine intervention or anything, they can at least see the goodness, or at least they can see the values or the philosophies behind it, and they can enjoy the story per se, for just its merit, for just the merit of the story. I think Ranjit ji would agree with this on me, and I think that's the way we writers should, push ourselves to work up as.
Hmm. Definitely right. Ranjit, would you like to add on to something?
No, I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. Our itihasas don't just tell us our stories, but they also tell you about our purusharthas, about dharma, how you should be leading your life, which is why it is called an itihasa. It's not just a chronological arrangement of history and what happened and who ruled and what wars happened, who they married, who their kids were. They are also teaching you stuff. So when we write stories based on our Puranas and our Itihas, we should be able to imbibe that and narrate it to our readers in a way that is sort of understandable to them, or give them a sort of aha moment that said, okay, I never thought about this.
Hmm.
That becomes very important. So the craft of writing is as important as the content which you're trying to convey. If both go together, you have a very, very good book, and you will have readers coming back to read more about what you write. But if your content is good, but craft is all over the place, or the other way around, it's going to be a
Hmm.
job.
Hmm. Right. No, it was such a nice conversation for me. I learned a lot, and I'll definitely be, showing off the knowledge that I gained to my friends and family, definitely. And I feel much more spiritually recharged after listening to both of you. And I do hope our listeners would feel the same after listening to our conversation. Any takeaway, any part away message that you both would like to give to our listeners, and then we will be wrapping up this conversation. Ranjit ji, why don't you begin?
Okay. Like I said before, please go back to the source and read. If you are a reader and if you'd like to know uh, where these characters came from, where were they originally mentioned, everything is available on the net today. It just needs a little bit of time, a little bit of search, and you get it. So do look at what was originally said. We have a lot of retellings that are happening. Uh, you have something called the critical edition of the Mahabharata. If you're interested in the Mahabharata now, it's been in English with Vivek Roy. Please go ahead and read it. Look at, follow one character. You want to see, you're a fan of Karna and you want to see it, go see how Karna is depicted in the Mahabharata. You may not like it, but that's how it is originally
That's
said.
the truth.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Everything else is somebody else's fancy. After that, you make up your mind. But do read
Hmm.
what is there. So I think if you are a reader, if you like stories like this, please go back. You don't have to read Rama of the Axe. Go to Brahmanda Purana and read about Parashurama there. If that fascinates you, please read this and see
Hmm.
what is here and what is there, and then you can make a judgment on about the book. So please go back and
Hmm.
read your stories. As a culture, every culture will die if you don't tell this, if you don't tell your stories, which is why a storyteller is so
Hmm.
important.
Right.
If you are made to feel ashamed of your stories, then there's something else at work here. You got to know your stories to see if there's something actually to be ashamed of them. So don't stop. We are a nation of songs and stories. We need to be singing and telling our stories, especially for the youth today who are so cut off from it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
which makes our job that much more difficult,
Hmm.
but I think really worthwhile.
Right. Antaji, your message?
And absolutely, I would just tell not just my readers or his readers or mythological readers, but anybody who is, have a little bit of interest into mythology, start knowing the facts. Start reading the actual unabridged versions, just like Ranjit ji said. Uh, in any kind of media, Karna is the ultimate anti-hero. If you make a film on Karna today, it's going to do 3,000, 4,000 crores. But what was Karna's character like? Nobody knows. How many people would know that what Krishna said to Karna while he was about to die. Krishna said that as a Sud Putra, you became the king of Karna. Thereafter, what did you do for your people, for your community? Did you do anything to uplift your man? Did you do anything to change the way the Varna system has been diluted? No. What did you do? You just choose a side and you stood by Duryodhan. Of course, that was your dharma and there was no wrong in it. You choose your dharma, but at the same time, was there greater good in it? No. So those kind of things you need to know. I'm not telling you that I'm not trying to villainize Karna, but I'm just telling you that you need to know all the facts. Similarly, there was
Hmm.
a reason. There were reasons. People say that everyone. I think 90% of people would say that Drona asked for the thumb from Ekalavya only because he wanted Arjuna to succeed. Is that what you know, Atishay? I'm just asking you. Or do you
No,
know
no.
the real reason was this? Ekalavya belonged to the kingdom of Magad. Magad was not an ally of Kuru Rajya. Here, Dronacharya was training the Kuru princes. So it was his responsibility to negate or nullify any powerful instrument or any powerful warrior that was against his kingdom. That is the reason why he asked for his thumb. So that a potential, enemy or a rival, unparalleled rival, of the Kuru kingdom can be neutralized beforehand. That is the reason, In fact, Lord Krishna killed Ekalavya because otherwise he would have taken part in the war and he would have sided with the Kauravas, making them further more difficult to beat. They would have
Hmm.
become practically invincible. So these are the things, if you don't know these facts, and you try the you put a lot of injustice on the other characters just because most people don't know this fact. That is why they judge Drona, they judge Arjuna.
Hmm.
People even go on to say that Arjuna was not a warrior par excellence. So you need to know all the facts. You need to know whom
Hmm.
he has fought, how he has acquired his weapons and everything. Nobody knows Arjuna. Not nobody, but most of the people do not know that Arjuna was a great dancer. He could play musical instruments at a time when it was considered taboo. Men, especially warriors, doing dancing and playing instruments, that was considered feminine. Arjuna broke
Hmm.
those stereotypes. Arjuna allowed Subhadra to kidnap him. Those were their things. This it's not so one dimensional. There, it's multidimensional. So you need to know the sources. You need to know the real things. Even people. There are also people who legitimately thinks that Krishna indeed had 16,000 wives. Just go and study the story behind that episode. Uh, so it's really important. Even today I never understand. To be really honest, I have understood a lot of things perhaps, but I don't completely understand the lessons or the insights from the Radha Krishna love. That episode. I don't understand it completely as of now. So I'm trying to understand it. I don't have an expertise on that topic yet, so I don't share an opinion. I want to learn first, so that is what I would
Hmm.
request. Rather, I would plead all the readers, all the mythology enthusiasts, so anybody who wants to, who has some time and wants to get somewhat spiritually inclined. You just go and read those texts, read multiple versions, and you should always know all the facts. Only then you can judge yourself, you can judge the other characters, and you understand the true essence, true essence of mythology. Otherwise things are going to get diluted. So the Varna system, it's been 7,000 years. Let us consider 5,000, 7,000 years since the Varna system has been in place. The entire Mahabharata had a big lesson that had, if there was no that discriminatory Varna system, if it was not based on birth but rather on work, as it was supposed to be, Karna would not have sided with the Kauravas. The war would have been different. Maybe thousands and lakhs of lives would have been saved. You know, but even now today, we are still at that same thing. Even today, there are so many karnas in our society, right? Even today, we have not, overcome all those things. So it's really important. You need to read. And from history, from mythology, from the ancient texts, if you don't read and if you don't try to, apply them in your contemporary times and try to, make the world or make your society a better place, I mean, it's futile just, screaming Jai Shri Ram.
Thank you so much, Antarji. Thank you so much, Ranjit ji, for joining us in the discussion today. It was such a thorough, it was such an insightful conversation. And I believe, the objective of Pragati Vichar Literature Festival Authors Marathon was to bridge the gap between the readers and the authors about the mythology and the respectful reason. And we believe we are doing much more greater thing about by inviting such authors, such knowledgeable authors, and to this wonderful session. Thank you so much for joining us, and looking forward to such more insightful conversation with you today. Thank you so much.